Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. It's very hard to follow on Akim's footsteps. I will try to complement his opening remarks, which reminded us that we are standing at the threshold with choices to be made. United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called this year the year of climate change, and he called on all of us to mobilize efforts to ensure that Copenhagen, where the United Nations will have a crucial conference on climate in December, is a successful event which leads to a comprehensive and effective conclusion. I know that most of you here, I believe hopefully all, accept the scientific evidence, so there's no need for me to go into this, and more we will hear about it later on. What I want to do in 9.5 minutes is to make the case why the time is now for business to take on even a bigger role. So let me advance a few arguments for your consideration. First, the Copenhagen Climate Conference is not just about climate change. It is also a vote on multilateral cooperation and the ability of keeping markets open, rule-based, and on a non-discriminatory basis. We should not forget that the last 3 decades, liberalization, which was a deliberate and requires continued policy choices, needs to be earned on an ongoing basis. We cannot assume that the next 3 decades will just be the same. The best way for business to ensure that global integration can continue is indeed to make the case for a successful climate conference in Copenhagen. I hope that all those business associations which still do not work for climate, but rather against climate, hear this message and will reflect on it. Secondly, I think we also need to recognize that now governments need to lead. They need to lead in Copenhagen, and we need to challenge them to look into the future and to have a truly long-term view. And maybe we should also remind them that history will not just judge them, or probably will even forget about their next elections, but history will judge them on what they will do in Copenhagen. Another important point, I think, which should be very encouraging for business is indeed that global integration and the fundamental principles of non-discrimination in trade and investment are an absolutely necessary ingredient if we are to tackle climate change. Already, business is doing enormous contributions on the diffusion of clean technology through technology, transfer, investment, and commercial transactions. Just coming back from China, I could witness some of the big new initiatives and projects that are taking shape as we speak, all of them based on commercial transactions, supported and guided by the right policy decisions. So here, transfer of technology, which some government delegates still treat as a black box, but which in reality is actually diffusing rapidly through commercial transactions, can only continue to flow if indeed we maintain an open trading system, non-discrimination in investment. Therefore, I believe it is also important to remind governments in Copenhagen to uphold these fundamental principles as well. And I hope that environmental advocates will understand this, because not supporting non-discrimination would also mean denying developing countries the opportunity to improve their standards. Another point I'd like to share with you is some of the most important lessons that I believe the financial crisis should have and does indeed tell you. Much has been said about financial regulation, and rightly so. The point that we don't find and don't hear so often is that underlying much of the malaise that occurred is the focus on short-term profit maximization as opposed to long-term value creation. Chasing quarterly profits and chasing incentive structures that lead to reckless behavior is definitely not a recipe for long-term sustainable development, nor for business success. Somehow we must work to shift major perspectives by market players, evaluators, to move from an obsession with quarterly and yearly results towards a more long-term view on what constitutes success. This, I believe, is one of the biggest challenges we face if indeed we are to integrate environmental, social, and governance issues into market incentives. The fifth point I'd like to share with you is about systemic risks. I think we all now accept that one of the biggest drawbacks of markets is it's done by human beings, and we are captured in our own relativity, we are following herd behavior, and we do not have a proactive view about the future. And while we pretend to be rational, in reality, more often than not, we follow the herd and wait for others to take action first. The most fundamental lesson, besides the need from short-term to long-term, is to have a fresh look at systemic global market risks. Many of you will understand this already, and from a UN perspective, I can assure you we do so too. Whether it is water scarcity, where already 1.2 billion are lacking access to fresh water, which also is critical for many business operations, whether it is natural disasters, which not only play havoc on people's life, but also disrupt business channels, whether it is food security, the most basic precondition for survival, but also a critical component in everything that has to do with market building, or whether it is security aspects, which inevitably connect many of these issues together. Therefore, stepping back and having a fresh look at systemic risks makes sense. And I'm sure once we do this, we will discover that climate change connects all of these issues, and that there's a need to have a fresh look at what constitutes risks for business. And I'm convinced that you will discover that much of the work of the United Nations in all the areas I mentioned, we are complementary partners, and it makes sense to work together. The final point I want to make is on the business case for taking early action on climate and environmental change. As we are striving to define a forward-looking vision that complements the macro vision on the new Green Deal from the micro perspective, coming to grips with a new definition of environmental stewardship that incorporates all these aspects I was talking about, is probably one of the biggest challenges we have. And I'm sure later today and tomorrow, we will hear many great examples that already much innovation is happening, much new efforts are made, and promising new initiatives are being launched, new market opportunities emerge. But to bring this together and to mainstream it, we all need to work much, much harder. And our contribution will be to recognize good performance and to work on enabling environment so that the incentive structure actually rewards good environmental stewardship, so that markets recognize and support such activities and help them to mainstream it. And this is what we have been trying to do also within the UN Global Compact, Caring for Climate, the Water Initiative, and related activities. And I believe, and I very much hope, that this event here today and tomorrow will significantly help to advance this agenda. So in short, I hope we achieve 4 things at this conference. First, to mobilize great support for a successful Copenhagen conference. Seal the deal. We should all go out and lobby governments, support governments, press governments to be bold and to grasp history at the right moment. Secondly, never ever should business again lobby against climate change. And I think we should be alert on this. And we should also work together to ensure this does not happen. Not now, not before Copenhagen. Thirdly, defining a new level of environmental stewardship where smart solutions become mainstream is the challenge of today. And here, sharing and learning is the key, and I very much hope the next 2 days will contribute to that. So I wish you all success for the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Georg. Well, we're now going to go straight into our first panel discussion, and I'm going to introduce the chair for this discussion, Mr. Charles Hodgson. There's an add-on, fantastic.
Yes, a quite important one, and I promise to do it. You will see in your conference material, there is a document which is called the Green Imperative from the B4E Summit Paris, and it's draft 1.5. This is a one-page summary of the outcome we hope to achieve at this meeting. Many of you have already been consulted, and you are strongly supportive of it. We want you all to please read this one-page document carefully, and we very much hope it finds your support so that by the end of tomorrow, we will be able to have an outcome document which shares our collective understanding of these issues. And Cornelis van der Lugt from the UNEP Environmental Program would be pleased to receive any comments you may have. But as I said, we very much hope you all will basically find this one-pager to be roughly reflecting what our thinking is. Thank you very much.